Okay. Hi, good morning, and thank you for joining us today. Today is our part two of our RPA updates. So let's take a look and see what has changed. So today we're going to talk about the new and revised purchase agreements and addendums, and just all the forms that have been modified in some way or another. So the most common ones that we're familiar with would be obviously the RPA, the residential purchase agreement. And then, you would write a probate purchase agreement or a manufactured purchase agreement. Those ones are the ones that were the most common, I would say, that we used, which are no longer actually in place anymore. So we're going to get into that. But these are, there's one actually new purchase agreement. And I don't know, because they're seeing that there's so many different, different investors that are building what they call spec homes. And those are, it's not your traditional builder who like Lennar or DR Horton or KV who, go and build homes and have their own agreements. These are, just investors who, build, homes here and there. They'll buy a piece of land and build homes. So these are the, they created this new purchase agreement for new builds. And then you have your condominium conversion subdivision purchase agreement, commercial purchase agreement. And then you have a new construction purchase agreement and notice of default purchase agreement, residential income purchase agreement, and your vacant land. So the vacant land, the residential income purchase agreement, and then your notice of default, those are still their own standalone purchase agreements, but there has been changes on them. So you just definitely want to make sure when you do get into those forms, everything is pretty self-explanatory, but when you get into them, you want to make sure that you are just reading everything and making sure you are marking everything appropriately, for your client. So one is new, like I mentioned, and 6 are revised. They're making, fundamental changes to their thought processes as a result, the RPA wasn't the only document that had to be revised to implement, the philosophy that CAR was trying to implement. So with that said, there's been, in addition to the revised RPA that we went over last time, there's now, the purchase agreements, and now there's additional addendums that have been changed. So these addendums are probably something that, like I said, we're going to be more common that we use. And these ones have been amended in a substantial way. Okay, so this is the new purchase addendums. And this one's new. Complete new construction. So it's a purchase agreement addendum, manufactured purchase home addendum. So like I said, it replaces your home purchase agreement, your probate agreement purchase addendum. It replaces your probate purchase agreement. So like before, you would see in the MLS where the agent would say, make sure you're using the probate, purchase agreement, because a lot of agents don't pay attention to that and they just send a regular RPA. Well, now you can send the RPA, but you need to attach the appropriate addendum to make sure that, you're marking all the boxes that are applicable. The next 2 purchase addendums are stock cooperative, which we really don't have very many co-ops. I don't know if any of you guys have ever done any co-ops in California. The only ones that I've ever seen are by the beach, but I really never ran into that. Tenancy in common, your purchase addendums, which you're going to probably start seeing a lot more of that. Okay, so just again, take the time to take a look and see if it's something that applies. Additional new forms, which again, if there's an advisory for the stock cooperative ownership, the tenancy in common financial disclosure. This is kind of like an HOA financial disclosure when you have a tenancy in common. So that's kind of going to be typical there. And then also tenancy in common ownership advisory. Those are going to be some new additional forms. Replacement forms are going to be the buyer's intent to exchange addendum, the delivery of increased deposit and liquidated damages. So it replaces the RID. And if you go to click on the old one, it's going to tell you that it's no longer, in existence. So it'll refer you to the new form. But just so you guys know, this one is, I talked about last week, this particular addendum, and it happens. So as a listing agent, you have to pay attention to this. If let's just say the client says, I only have $1,000 right now because I have to take money out of my 401k, or I have to take it out of my stocks, or wherever they're taking it out of. So we'll do an increased deposit. So the increased deposit is for $5,000 or $10,000 or the remaining of whatever satisfies your seller. But remember, if this form is not delivered to them once that deposit is received, that money cannot be held for liquidated damages in the event that you're trying to hold their deposit. So you may think, oh, well, their total deposit is 10,000, but their initial was only 1,000. So if you didn't send them the DID, you're SOL. Okay, so so you just got to make sure and be mindful that anytime someone wants to do an additional or an increased deposit later on and not at the initial deposit, that money cannot be used for liquidated damages, in the event, let's say they don't perform. Okay, so just keep that in mind, anytime you have increased deposit. And then you have lead-based paint, and that addendum has been changed. And remember, it replaces the FLD. They changed it so you can find it, the acronym LPD. Options and upgrades, that replaces the NCA. Seller's intent to exchange addendum. Again, it shows you on there what it replaces. Tenant occupied property replaces the TIP. And that's an important form if you are in escrow with a property that has a tenant in it. And then the wildfire disaster advisory, that replaces the DFA. So the substantially revised forms, these are the forms that I actually want to get into today more in detail. So that way, because these are forms that we're going to be using probably more common than not. So the assignment agreement, the buyer counteroffer, cancellation of contract, California consumer privacy, contingency removal, notice to buyer to perform, notice to seller to perform, receipt for reports, residential lease after sale, request for repairs. So all these forms sound pretty familiar to you, right? Seller response and buyer reply to request for repairs, seller counteroffer, seller multiple counteroffer, and the SPQ. So we're going to look at those forms shortly. So, in addition, because there was actually 91 form changes, 91. That's how many there was. So in total. So we have 58 additional that were minor changes. It could have been from typos to minor things, just making it easy signature, in an easier place and stuff like that. But these are all of the acronyms of the other forms that have been changed, in one way or another. So I just want, like I said, I want to just make sure that you are completing it correctly. So just when you get into these forms, just, give it an extra eye to be sure. A lot of these forms we don't even use. So some of them won't even apply, but the ones that do, that you use. Okay, so let's get into, let me do this really quick. Let's get into the revised forms. Does anyone have any questions so far? No? Sign this.
Screen share.
Huh?
Are you trying to screen share?
No, I'm getting into a different document.
Oh.
But it gets confusing. I hate this. Honestly. Drives me crazy. Okay. So these are the addendums that have changed. So this is, the first one is the assignment of agreement addendum. So this particular addendum is basically used when you're assigning, or you're either adding a buyer, you're deleting a buyer. Like, this form is going to be needed anytime you do that. Okay, so make sure that if your client says, hey, guess what? I'm gonna add my wife onto the transaction now, or now I need a co-buyer, or you know what, Alexa, did you print them?
Yeah.
Okay, she's gonna give them to you guys. So these are the addendums. This is not the contract. Yeah. She'll give you guys a copy. Yeah, I don't know if she, did you not get, I sent I emailed you, so maybe you didn't get it. So, so that's the first one. So basically, here is where it tells you, you know, partial assignment, or total assignment. So here's adding a buyer, and then here is new, deleting a buyer. Okay, and then who are you assigning? You know, who is it that you're assigning? Delivery a document, and this is just saying assignee acknowledges that buyer has already provided all prior documents. Because let's say you're doing it at the end and you've already done all disclosures, you've done everything. Prior documents not yet been delivered. So it defaults to you've already given the documents, because they're assuming that that's what, you know, what they're saying or what that has been done. But in the event you haven't, then you would select, you know, number option 2. And then pre-qualification, obviously they've already been, you know, pre-approved. Time to return initial documents. So initial copies of all prior documents are attached to this assignment. So again, remember, this way you don't have to, you know, re-deliver everything, or you can pick option 2, which is you're going to deliver initial copies of all prior documents to them within X amount of days, okay? And then effective failure to return or attach documents, you can give a notice to perform. Consideration for assignment, this is just saying buyer has received money if they are. So because there's different reasons, someone does get assigned. Buyer has not received any monetary consideration. So, decide A or B. And that's basically, you just add other terms if there's any other terms, and then everybody signs in the back. Okay. And then buyer counter offer number 1. So this is, again, one of the forms that has been changed. So pretty standard and obvious. So date, seller counter offer number, and then this is saying, what are you, this counter offer is responding to what? Is it to a counter offer, or is it to a seller multiple counter offers? So always make sure that you're mindful of the document that you're responding to, or is it something else other? And then dated, remember the date equals the date that is on the document that you received. So if your seller counter offer is, December 5th, then that date's going to go here, even though today is the 16th. So the date today is the 16th, but what was that counter offer or multiple counter offer that you received dated? That date goes there. And then obviously property between buyer and seller. And then what they did was they incorporated the liquidated damages and arbitration clause here. And this is just letting them know that, it has to be initialed, and that it says each required initials by all parties. If either of those paragraphs is not initialed by all parties, that paragraph is excluded from the initial final agreement. Okay, so let me explain why this is done. In the purchase agreement, a lot of times, because when you send a DocuSign, it's an option to initial there. And if you're not paying attention and you just send the RPA, because it's considered complete, right? Whether it's initialed or not. So what happens is if your buyer initialed it, but now your seller didn't, there's always a discrepancy about, is it part of the contract? Is it not part of the contract? So a lot of times when that would happen with me, I would make sure in the counter, I wrote this in there, like the arbitration clause, it does, it is in effect or it isn't in effect, whatever the case was, depending on my client. But now they're writing it in here because it's such a common error on the contract. So when it goes to be litigated or, disputed, it's like, so who's right, who's wrong? There was no agreement there because it could go either way. So the purpose of this is just letting them know that again, if you read it, the liquidated damages and arbitration of disputes paragraphs in the offer, each require initials by all parties. If either of those paragraphs is not initialed by all parties, that paragraph is excluded, which that's obvious if either of them aren't initialed, unless specifically referenced for inclusion in paragraph 1C or this or another counter offer or an addendum. Unless otherwise agreed in writing, down payment and loan amount will be adjusted in the same proportion as in the original offer, but deposit amount shall remain unchanged from the original offer. So that makes sense, okay? So again, just make sure, be mindful on the liquidated damages clause. If it's not initialed, you need to reference it because this is reminding you like, hey, this is a reminder, if it's not initialed, it's not included. So make sure that you have some type of agreement. Okay, so that's just another reference to remind you. And then here you're going to put other terms just like you normally would, purchase price to be and whatever the case is. And then here, if you're adding anything to incorporate into this counteroffer, you at the bottom here on D, if you're adding another addendum, then you're gonna mark here, and this is addendum number 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. And then there's additional boxes here so you can write the addendum. So let's just say the seller has decided to stay in the home. So now you need to attach the, the residential lease after sale. So the RLAS would go there. So we know that that's been incorporated into this counter, okay, and be made part of the contract. And so here we go down here, expiration. The buyer, shall be deemed revoked and and the deposits, if any, shall be returned, which we know that doesn't happen, but unless by 5 p.m. on the third day, if not, no more than, and then you can write in your time and date if you want to do it sooner. So it's just really up to you. They took out the place where you have to write in your name because it just says delivered to buyer or buyer's authorized agent. Before you had to type in the person's name or persons. So that's that. And does anyone notice anything else that has been removed that would be typically at the bottom? Does anybody notice?
The date of, where they, leave.
A confirmation of initial?
Yeah. So the confirmations are gone. And we're gonna get into that next time, why? But there's no longer the confirmation. You know, people be like, send me the confirmation. It's like, I'm holding on to that. Like they think it's some kind of power. I don't know, but it's not. So yeah, so that's gone. And then what they did also now is if the seller is not agreeing to this buyer's counteroffer, it says subject to the attached seller counteroffer or seller multiple counteroffer. So I think this is great because it was so small before that you weren't able to like write everything in there. So it's nice that it's super big and you can read it. So are you getting now a counteroffer or now multiple counteroffer? So and then the seller obviously is going to sign it. Okay.
I think also it's better because on the confirmation, your office also wants that to be initial or else you won't get it.
Yeah.
Now it's not, like, agents don't acknowledge it either. So
Yeah.
they just have to sign, the seller to sign it, buyer to sign it.
So the next one is cancellation of contract, which nobody likes this form, right? No one wants to cancel a contract. So again, same things apply. This is, regarding the purchase agreement or other, if there's something else. And what is the date of the agreement? And then property, between both parties and cancellation of contract. Make sure when you are filling out this part that you have your buyer sign both or your seller sign both sections, section 1 and section 2. A lot of times that's missed. So it talks about buyer, seller, both buyer and seller cancels and why. So as permitted by good faith exercise. So that's obviously if they still have their contingency period, why are they canceling? Because they did, they weren't happy with something or the appraisal or whatever their good faith exercises. You just put in the paragraph there. Buyer has failed to remove their contingencies after giving a notice to perform. Seller has failed to remove theirs, after giving a notice to perform. The other party has failed to close escrow after being given a demand to close escrow per mutual agreement or other. So party canceling the contract is who signs up here. Okay, so this is who's initiating the cancellation. Okay, so it's funny how they put that on there. They made sure who signs there, the party who's canceling the contract. Okay. And then we get down into the release of the deposit. And this just talks about release of funds by escrow holder requires mutually signed instructions. So basically, escrow can't release the funds unless both sign. And they're, the cancellation. So here, full release, buyer and seller cancel escrow, the escrow number with the escrow company. The parties mutually release each other from any obligation to buy, sell, or exchange the property under the agreement. So is it C1? Seller authorizes the release of deposit to buyer, less buyer's fees and costs that he's already incurred, including any escrow cancellation fees. And just so you guys know, if you're not reviewing, every escrow is different. So make sure when you get the escrow instructions, you see if they have a cancellation fee. That way you can let your clients know this escrow charge is a cancellation fee, because some do and some don't. Because otherwise your client's gonna say, wait a minute, you said I'm gonna get my entire deposit back. Why are they keeping $500? So make sure, when you tell them, less any cancellation fees at escrow, we always tell them, well, you're not gonna get your appraisal back. You're not gonna get your, home inspection back. And then just make sure you tell them if they're dependent upon the escrow company, you may not, they may charge a cancellation fee too. So just make sure that they know that. And then again, it has to be in the escrow instructions. Or it could be 2, buyer authorizes release of buyer's deposit to seller, less seller's fees and costs already incurred and agreed in the contract to be paid through escrow, pursuant to any properly executed liquidated damage clause. So again, this is in the event the buyer said that they are going to agree to certain fees, then that would be marked there if that's the case. Buyer authorizes release of, and then they're going to put how much they're going to give the seller of their deposit. So maybe they're saying, you know what, I'm willing to give them 50% because yes, I waited till the last minute, or because, whatever the case is. And then they would, complete that there. D, partial release and reservation of rights. Buyer and seller cancel escrow with, the escrow number with whoever the escrow company is. The parties mutually release each other from any obligation, again, to buy or sell. Escrow, an authorized escrow holder or whoever is holding the deposit, until they receive a mutual instructions, judicial decision, or arbitration award. So a lot of times, again, if they're gonna have, they're gonna be fighting for it, that happens, that they're gonna have to wait to see what happens. So basically, just make sure that they sign it, where they should, on both sides. And that's the cancellation. The California Consumer Privacy Act. This is the one that's attached to the RPA. And this is just showing it's a lot shorter than it was, but it's just letting them know that we do collect data, obviously, from the buyers and the consumers, but we do not, give any information out. And they do, in case it says right here, they have the option, to opt out or opt in, but we don't give their information out. And it does give them, they can obtain more information. And there is a website there at the bottom if they have more questions about the CCPA. Contingency removal. So up here, it's contingency in accordance to the purchase agreement, request for repair or response, and reply to the request for repair. So basically, when you're writing an offer and you're removing loan contingency, appraisal contingency, if you're a listing agent, even though it's on the purchase agreement, you also want them to sign, you also want them to sign. Yeah, okay. You also want them to sign, the contingency removal, and then you would mark on the top that it's attached to the purchase agreement. That's actually the default. So it would, you wouldn't mark anything else. So contingency removal 1, removing appraisal, because you said, you would remove appraisal. So attach this to your RPA. If you are sending it to be removed with your request for repair, because maybe they agreed to your repairs, then you would, mark that one. And then if you would like to do the response and reply to request for repair, then you would mark there, or other, if if there's another form that's, asking for it, an addendum or something. And again, dated is the date of the agreement. So the contract, the RPA, the date that it was done, not the acceptance date. Property between buyer and seller. And then here it does let the buyer know, what they're doing, what they're removing. So right here, look, it says if any, or for repairs, corrections, or inability to obtain financing, waiver of statutory disclosures is prohibited by law. So buyer removes only the following individually checked buyer contingencies. So loan, and then it shows you what it references in the RPA, where you can find what exactly it means. So it's, again, they're making these forms so that way a buyer can reference. It's like, okay, I'm removing loan, because before you just tell them and they had to understand or they had to know. But now, if they get this form, I'm removing loan, where it's loan, let me go to my RPA, paragraph 3L1 and 8A. What does that mean? Appraisal, investigation of property. And they've broken it down pretty good, because investigation of property means everything's been done, every single thing, disclosures, your physical inspection, everything, just, the prelim, like everything a seller's required to give you. But if you notice, they break it down pretty well. So entire buyer's investigation contingency, again, on paragraph 12. Only the part of the investigation related to inspections concerning physical attributes of the property. So obviously their physical inspection. All buyers' investigations other than the physical attributes. Entire buyer's investigation, except if there's, something that it wasn't included. Review of seller's documents. So review of seller's documents. And then it goes over here, all the paragraphs. So make sure that if you're checking this, that it includes everything that's listed in these paragraphs. Review of all sellers' documents except government reports, statutory and other disclosures, paragraph 11 or other. And then E is preliminary title report, common interest HOA, review of leased or liened items, which that's something new too. Now, if the home has solar or any other type of, water softeners, alarms, there's all kinds of different things that could be, leased or liened. Sale of buyer's property or other, if there's any other contingency that's related to this purchase. So it does also have the option at the bottom, similar to like the previous one, all buyers contingencies are removed except, and these are just kind of basic. It breaks it down more when you're, up here in the item C. It gives you more options, but down here is just, let's just say you're waiting for just the appraisal, then you can, just simply mark the appraisal. Or item 4, buyer hereby removes any and all, and then it just lets them know once all contingencies are removed, whether or not buyer has satisfied himself regarding all contingencies or received any information relating to those contingencies, buyer may not be entitled to return of their deposit if the buyer does not close escrow. So this is just, again, letting them know, once they release it. So, and then it tells you down here, the note, if this form is attached to a request for repairs, seller's response and buyer reply to request for repairs, or another form or document such as an addendum or amendment to existing agreement, it is only valid if buyer and seller agree to the requests made on that form or document. So remember that they added this portion in here because basically what it's saying is, because on the request for repairs, which we'll get to, it says, like, I agree to these conditions, but you have to sign off on the contingency. So if they sign the contingency and then now they don't do those things, then the contingency is no longer valid. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so the next thing is notice to buyer to perform. This is fighting words, right? When we get these. These are
Right.
Yeah.
Josiah,
Yeah. So nobody wants one of these, right? Nobody wants one of these. So now it's, again, same thing at the top. Again, we can't, say it, as many times, but you'd be surprised. It's always wrong. The date, make sure you're dating it according to the document attached or the agreement. Though that's the agreement date. And then notice of buyer to perform, always make sure you're labeling or you're numbering in accurate order. You don't want to have three notice to performs that are number ones. You want to make sure you're numbering them. So seller hereby gives buyer notice to remove the specified contingencies and take the specified contractual actions as follows. So again, dependent upon why you're being received this, typically it's because you're not removing contingencies. That's probably one of the number one reasons to receive a notice to perform. And just so you guys know, you as a listing agent can send the notice to perform 2 days before it's actually due. Okay, so like, let's just say you have your listing agent, okay, and you have a buyer's agent who's, I'm on it, we're gonna release this contingencies in 7 days, we're this, we're that, right? Selling you everything. Okay, great. So just so you know, because a lot of times people think, well, it's 7 days, but we actually have 9 days because, and then who's gonna send us a notice to perform? So we actually might have 10 or 11 days. So they're trying to buy time, right? Well, if they've sold you on that, like you're accepting this offer because they're gonna move quickly, then send that notice to perform on day 5. That way, day 7, they don't perform, you can cancel. And they'll know that you're serious. Okay, so it's just letting you know, you can't serve it before then because it won't be valid. It has to be only 2 days before it's actually due, because that gives them 2 days to perform. So that's why.
Sonia, what about if they just disregard, even the notice to perform?
Well, then it's up to you to cancel. At that point, you don't want to waste time with someone who's not doing what they need to do.
Just cancel?
Yeah, if I'm saying a notice to perform, it's because I have someone on the back burner ready to go, right? You don't leave unless you got someone.
Yeah.
It's just the way it goes.
Yeah. Otherwise, you're trying to save.
Yeah, yeah. Otherwise, you're trying to make it work. Dang it.
Still always the case.
Yeah,
Do your job.
yeah. So, so that's just so you know, because I know some people get confused about that, about the contingency. And then make sure it's right too, because sometimes when it's served to you and they didn't fill it out right, it's not valid. Like, so that's another thing. There's ways to make where the contingency is it's not even accurate, or it's not even valid because they marked the wrong box or they didn't do something right. So just, you'd be surprised.
So let's just say if you on the RPA, you also on the counter, my bad, on the counter, you specifically say, in 7 days, or like you said, 7 days, all your contingencies will be removed automatically. Is that even valid?
No, right?
Not valid,
Not valid, okay.
not valid.
Automatically, no.
Because normally
gotta have
who's gonna do that is gonna be the investors or a listing agent that just thinks he's a badass.
Yeah. And and it's okay, you can sign it, but nothing's automatic in California. So,
Even though on the
Only-
counter, the buyer signed it.
doesn't matter. Contingency removal is required to be completed. Because even if you mark, well, on the previous RPA, even if you marked that, like we talked about last time, your FHA buyer, and you say that you're moving appraisal, it doesn't apply. I got a counter offer yesterday. I have an FHA buyer. It was confusing. I think I read it out loud. It was like, buyer to remove appraisal contingency. The next sentence was appraisal contingency to be removed in 14 days. What is it? So that's what I'm saying. Like, sometimes,
So I'm just gonna sign it, so I can get my offer accepted.
Yeah.
No, you have to send me the right form.
Yeah,
That is not the right.
so
form.
that's what I'm saying. A lot of times they're not, you know.
I'm a cheat.
That's how I received it, the FHA offer, no appraisal. So I sent a Connor to remove a lot of stuff to clean the upper and send the contingency removal, the appraisal contingency. So they sent me that contingency removal with Connor offer.
So what if I get that counter? Or what if I'm the listing agent and I'm gonna send the counter to all contingency to be removed and send them that form so they can sign it?
Yeah,
The CR.
That is
yeah,
valid.
yes, the CR. Well,
Why not?
This,
Yeah.
this is a contingency
That's
removal.
a contingency removal.
Oh, no, this
No,
one's not. This is the board. No. This, when you're negotiating a contract, the contingency removal, not this one, yeah. 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 So,
I'm just trying to make something.
yeah,
I'm gonna stop being creative. I'm gonna stop being creative. I'm gonna stop getting.
Yeah.
Everybody.
you know, it's, I had I'm gonna tell you guys something. I was in contract with with an
My
agent
idea.
and she was newer. She wasn't new, but she was newer. And we had actually, you know, removed all, we were doing our final walkthrough. We removed all contingencies, like everything was done. And my clients decided the day of the walkthrough, it was bad though. So let me check, because when we viewed the home, this is why your avid is so important. So we had viewed the home, but there was so much stuff in the house that you couldn't really walk through the rooms, you know? So, you know, my avid read like, you know, there was a huge carpet, couldn't see what's under, you know, couldn't really see the room because it was full of personal belongings. Like it was super hard to really do an inspection because you're like, you know, trying to squeeze through. But anyhow, when we went to do the final walkthrough, the home was vacant. Well, now that it's vacant, it looked seriously like someone like shot through the house. Like it looked like there was bullet holes throughout the house, but you wouldn't have known that because there was so much pictures on the wall. Like there was so many paintings and photos, like you would have never known. But now that everything's been removed, they yanked everything off. Like there was holes, like I'm not even kidding you. It looked like someone went through with a shotgun and just like shot the whole house up. The carpet was awful, like because they moved their rugs. And so my clients walked in there, they were like, this is not the house that we wanted to buy. And if you notice on the contract, it says a final walkthrough is not a contingency. So what do you think? So my clients wanted to cancel. So I told them at this point, you signed all your contingencies off. You're gonna lose your 10 grand. Like they have the right to keep your $10,000. And they were like, you know what, Sonia, we'd rather lose our 10 grand than buy this house. It is horrible. So I told them, you know what, let's talk to an attorney just so you guys know your rights before we do anything. I just want you guys to do that. So I made an appointment for them to talk to an attorney. We went to the attorney's office the next day. And the thing about me is, of course, I love attorneys, you know, they do their job, but this is why it's super important to get the advice even of active agents or brokers. Because we sat there, we explained, the attorney said, well, you signed your contingencies, you're pretty much done. Like there's nothing we can do for you. But I was like, there, you know, my mind spins, right? So I'm like, you know what, let me figure this out. So we left, they're like, you know what, Sonia, we just want to cancel. I said, well, let's look at it. How much would it cost us to have it re-drywalled, painted, and the flooring put in? Why don't we ask them for some money? Let's do that before we cancel. And so I wrote this long letter with pictures and everything else, send it to the agent. She's like, what? And I just told her, you know, this wasn't the condition that we initially bought it in. Look at my avid, blah, 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 blah. I went back and forth with her. Well, because how my avid was completed and hers was not, she didn't write anything on hers. Okay, so basically I kind of used that and I told her, you are liable because you did not disclose anything on here. Did you even do the walkthrough? Did you do this, that, whatever? Anyways, to make a long story short, my clients got their deposit back. I ended up fighting her tooth and nail for it because I kept telling her that they are gonna go after, you and your company and la, 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 la. So she talked to her seller and basically told her seller, you know what, there's nothing we can do, and so you have to give them their deposit back. So my clients ended up getting, because what ended up happening was they agreed to give them 10 grand to do the flooring and to do that, but my clients didn't want the home anymore. They were just so, they were like, that's not our home, Sonia. No, we don't want it. So at that point, I'm like, oh, shoot, like, they want it, but I was just able to, I just kind of kept going and just telling her how they were just really, upset and just, they didn't want it, whatever. So anyways, we canceled, we got, they did get their deposit back. So that's why I tell you that it's super important, just communication, take your transactions seriously, do your forms, do your part for your client, because not every agent does. And that's when it comes down to it, that's all you have. It's like a fighter. If you don't condition for your fight, you think you're going to knock someone out in the first round, you go 12 rounds, but you didn't do, what you were supposed to do, you're done. You're gassed out. Like there's nothing you can do at that point because you didn't prepare. So make sure you guys are covering. That's what our jobs are, is to cover every angle, possible. So that way we make sure that if God forbid, we get called in there, you did the right thing. So.
Now, I have a question. This is aside from, this, but I just had this situation, right? So I'm selling a client's, house, and it's an investment. It's not in her name, it's in her father's name, which is it as an investment. But I was talking to my girlfriend who serves on the board of the Grievance Club on the MLS. And she said, you're not supposed to advise them to do a 1031 exchange. You're supposed to say, I believe this falls under a 1031 exchange. However, I don't know how your father does his taxes. I advise him to go to a tax man because God forbid something happens, and I didn't say that. Am I liable for not advising them to go see a tax man?
Yes, you are.
I am.
We are.
So there should be a form. I'm just saying, because sometimes when everything's fine, you're in the honeymoon stage,
Right.
You're excited and everything, but it can turn real ugly on you.
Yes.
So maybe I was thinking, hey, what if they say that I never advised them? Because what they did, Sonia, is she said, my tax man said, do not do a 1031 exchange. What we're gonna do in escrow, we're gonna do a quick claim to me and my boyfriend, and then we're gonna sell the property. In escrow, I go, to me, that's like
Wow.
cleaning up the knife right after you used it. There's
Right.
evidence of a premeditatedness. So it's a red flag.
Yeah.
So, but it can get ugly. Now we closed, and one of my friends goes, I hope they don't come back to you and say that you never advised them, and now they turn on you.
Well, that's the purpose of documentation. That's why we're supposed to keep logs of our conversations. That's why text messages are important, emails are important, because that is your way to prove you communicated. And I'll tell you, like, I've been in mediation. I've had someone say, I didn't sign that document. That wasn't me. This is this and this is that. So my communications was, you confirmed receipt. Yes, done, signed, sent back. You did sign that document.
So
Do you see what I'm saying? So you have to really cover your tracks. But in the RPA, so there is a part in there where it says buyer is advised, and even on the RLA, seller is advised to, to seek, tax, attorney, all of that, all of those, because we can't give legal advice. But you're right, it is our word against theirs. So a lot of that conversation should be done via email or text or however you converse with them. So that way you save that.
So if I don't have that, would it be good to do an addendum and have them sign?
You
Say,
can.
"Look,
I mean, if you feel that, I was made advised, like you're saying, that to go seek it, I'm considering possibly a 1031 exchange. I've been made aware, that it's up to me to go talk to my tax advisor or whoever.
Because Norma told me I will not do that escrow. They're gonna have to go somewhere else, because that's a liability.
Yeah, especially in the beginning, when red flags come up, they're already saying, hey, this or that. You're like, cover yourself. That's why I'm saying cover yourself. Yeah, absolutely.
Just to speak, not too much, but just just.
Yeah.
Give it to somebody else.
But should we be advising them to go see an attorney or no?
I would, anytime that they have like, if, like, for instance, Eva has one right now that it's in a trust, you know, and they're asking questions about taxes, and although we do those and everyone's situation's different, depending, I was asking, is it revocable, irrevocable, everything, there's so many things that change what is, you know, what is and what isn't. But I told her, you can kind of say, well, more or less, this is kind of what happens, but you need to go and speak to someone, you know, a CPA or your tax, whoever does your taxes, to give you that advice, because I don't know anything about your financials. I don't know anything. And not only that, I'm not certified, you know, to give that information. And they'll remember that. So I'm saying you have to make sure that verbiage is said there. And then you could even send them a text message just to recap, just for our conversation, you know, you're gonna go talk to an advisor, you're gonna do this and that. I'll talk to you soon. And then there it is.
Can we do an addendum?
You can, yeah.
Better.
Yeah, you can do an addendum so that, you know, you attach it, you can. Uh-huh. Because just like Martha said, you're in the honeymoon stage, and she said it well, right? In the honeymoon stage, what, you're willing to do anything. You have all this and that, I'm okay with that. And then all of a sudden I'm not, right?
Yeah, I'm in a deal like that with some Colombians, and they're very feisty and passionate people, and now they're all angry. With bullets on, you know?
Yeah,
And it's like, it was so beautiful in the beginning.
of course.
But now I can see the daggers coming out now that they're settled in their house.
Probably relate to Pablo Escobar. Good luck.
Oh my gosh. That's funny. Okay, so let's see.
Sonia, one point, talking about the FHA contingency, because FHAs, sometimes you still have to go through the process of telling specifically, we need to remove this within certain amount of time.
The only time FHA and VA is for appraisal. That's it.
Appraisal, that's it. right?
That's it. The inspections, the loan, all of that, if they remove it, they remove it. But that FHA, VA, a mandatory clause protects a VA and FHA buyer.
Sonia,
Yes.
so you mentioned, I wanted to ask about that.
Oh,
'cause
wait, hold on a minute. Wait.
I'm-
TV's talking. I'm scared. Just kidding.
Let me know when I
Okay, say that
can.
again. We couldn't hear you.
Oh, okay. I was asking because you mentioned the FHA VA clause. Are you talking to me?
Yeah, I'm
Oh,
talking to
okay.
you, Letty.
Oh, okay, because I hear myself echoing. I thought somebody else was talking. I'm sorry. So if they give me that form, even though they attach the CR removal, it still doesn't count?
It does not. They have that to protect them.
Wow, okay,
They can get the loan without it.
gotcha.
Yeah, basically, if a listing agent doesn't understand the contract, it can seem, it can be, what's it called? Misleading.
Yeah, because if they waived it, but then they attached the CR, but then I noticed that a mandatory clause is still attached.
If your seller signs the FHA a mandatory clause, if they don't sign it, then then it's kind of, because some won't sign it. We have some sellers who won't sign it because we have the CR. So just don't sign the FHA VA a mandatory clause.
Okay.
Will they get their loan get disqualified if they don't sign it?
No, they will need it to fund, they will need it to close, but by that time you'll have your appraisal.
Okay, so you could wait till after appraisal comes in and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm. It's, and you know what, and I'll be honest with you, it's one of those things where it's all up to whoever you get, the judge you get. I'll be honest with you, there's nothing set in stone. And that's the hardest part with that's why they're trying to make these contracts a little bit more, as they say, dummy proof, but still, you know, it's still, because when you go to mediation, okay, look, let me give you an example. If anything is under $10,000, you go to small claims, okay? Does that small claims judge know anything about real estate? No. He's maybe, you know, hit and runs or tickets, traffic tickets, or whatever the case is, right? So, so now you have 2 minutes to go and present and tell him why you should get the money over this person. So again, depending upon who you get, it can go either way. It really can. You see, I mean, if I'm a judge and it's like, well, here it says this, this form supersedes, this, but you signed this after or before, so it's just really up to them. But the way we're told is if it's an FHA, appraisal cannot be removed.
So when you get that counter and you really want that house and they say remove the appraisal contingency, you just remove it, but you know you can't remove it. But you're just going through the motions so you can get accepted.
That's the way that they're explaining it to us. Yes.
This happened to me. She knew what she was doing, the buyer's agent, and she sent me, I say, no, contingency removal, no, nothing. And then somebody told me, thank God that it wasn't still at a time that I can do things. And somebody told me that, no, you cannot remove contingency with FHA.
The first page.
But you did it, just so you can get in. They did it.
Let me see. Hold on real quick. Okay, so if you guys don't have it with you, but on the RPA, section E1, it says, car forms FVAC or HID attached, because if it's FHA or VA, well, it's on the first page,
You don't have that one.
unless you brought your package from last week. Okay. So this is the RPA page 1, and on there it says E1 on the bottom, if FHA or VA check deliver list of lender required repairs. Okay, so that's that. I'm trying to see where I know there was a place I've seen it. Oh, right here. Oh, it's on page 2 actually. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Which one numbers, one letter? Page 2.
Okay, so page 2, Al 2. Okay, we went over this last week. Al 2. It says appraisal contingency. And then on the very far right, it says no appraisal contingency. So you would mark there if you're sending your offer with no appraisal. Underneath, it says removal of appraisal contingency does not eliminate appraisal cancellation rights in the FVAC. It says it in there.
But this is a new one.
This is the new one.
So even
We
if,
still have the old
so
one.
even if you still put it in there, it doesn't matter. It's not-
No. They put it does apply. So you have to understand that they created this because people weren't reading and didn't understand. They put important data here. So it applies in the old one. It's just not obvious to the eye. It's not clear. Exactly. So FHA and VA cannot waive appraisal. But again, if the agent doesn't know that, like let's say the agent who did that didn't know that, then they're thinking, or if they told their buyer, you're gonna do it anyways, then the buyer's gonna have no choice. You see what I'm saying? I mean, do you see a problem with the appraisal or? No?
I guess we just started. And that's a
Yeah.
no, but
So, but just so you guys know, it shows you that they are protected by that form. Okay, so just so you guys know
Unless the
that.
sellers don't sign it, right?
Well, again, that's kind of what we did, but it's just really,
But the lender
it's,
wants that.
yeah, well, yeah, but by that time, you have your appraisal. Because they don't need it right away.
So when you represent a buyer, do you send that with your offer?
I do, because
Okay,
I'm
so-
the
protect your
buyers
buyer.
who's
Yeah.
who I'm representing.
Right.
But again, if you're a listing agent, then you just need to tell your client, you need to let them know, we take FHA. If we have to,
It has to appraise.
if it doesn't appraise and the buyer doesn't agree, because the buyer might be okay with it. And you won't have an issue, but if the agent is trying to play you, like saying, hey,
and if
you know what? Don't even worry. She's telling her client, don't even worry about it. they're gonna have no choice.
So
So
if you take-
it depends on how the
If you tell
agents.
them if you have an issue with an FHA, then don't put it on the listing agreement, I mean, on the listing, on the MLS. No FHA, just put convention residence, that way nobody brings you an FHA.
There's
They
still
don't
some
have
people
FHA.
that's
They don't
discriminating.
listen.
Yeah.
That's the thing that they don't know.
Or the other thing you could do is maybe write an addendum where you put that, the contingency removal supersedes the
I know.
the
I know a
cancellation.
listing agent that would do this. Oh, it's incomplete. Trash. Never called you back. I knew this guy, he's like, because I took him an offer, he goes, Mario, just because I know you, but I would have thrown your stuff, I'm in the trash.
Why
He
did
goes,
you?
I don't have time to teach somebody.
Oh,
everything."
okay.
Why didn't you have a complete offer, Mario?
But you know what? I learned from him.
It's
Now
okay,
my-
Mario, you're in
now
my class.
Now my purchases, everything.
Hey,
that I-
Sonia.
I
Yeah.
do.
Okay, so quick question. So if you really are wanting to have the contingency removal, then like Mario said, just really entertain conventional only because nothing else would stand. Am I understanding this correctly?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and like I said, the other way I would do it is if, let's say your sellers are adamant about selling to a certain person, because that happens. They're like, I want this person to buy it.
And I have a perfect scenario happen to me. And exactly the words I told my client, my seller. I said, I'm gonna put FHA, VA convention. I said, I'm already at the peak of your listing. Okay? I said, your property probably will sell 460, 465, tops 480. You might get offers higher than that. That doesn't mean that it's gonna close at that because you still have an appraisal. If you get an FHA, guess what? Most likely it may not appraise. So what happens? I get a 505 offer. FHA, and that's all I was getting.
Yeah,
So
I
I took the highest one. Appraisal came in. What do you think the appraisal came in? 480,000 on what I listed. Buyers, the seller goes, oh, what happened? No, that is what happened. That is what your property is worth. I said to you from the beginning when I took your listing, tops was 480. At the lowest, 465. No, the FHA does not have, if I don't have any more money, you're gonna have to sell this property at 480,000. That's just the bottom line. And we had this conversation, him and his wife, and what goes, yeah, I remember you saying that. So then, what do you wanna do? I made him sell it. Because that is the top of the market. I said, if somebody would have given me away cash, okay, 505, there's nothing going on. Conventional, maybe they put up $100,000. Okay, you might get away with it, but it's not gonna, you're not gonna get away with an FHA. So I made it to him very clear, and that's how I sold the deal.
You know what I see, Mario, all the FHA appraisal, they came at the listing price of the property.
Yes.
They're never
Yes.
came higher.
And another thing was, his property identical to has just closed at 490, and I said, yours cannot be at 490,000. Why? That house had a pool. So if you would have put a pool and spent $80,000, your $80,000 just value at 10,000. Because you're not gonna get another 80,000 on top of what you listed. It's not gonna happen. So that's what my code deal was. I made so.
Well, we'll see.
Yeah, so like I was saying, the only other thing I would suggest is talking to your clients and letting them know. With an FHA, it may be hard for us to, they can probably cancel and for us to keep their deposit. So, but if they're like, it's okay, I really want this buyer to try or whatever, but you could try, like I said, and add an additional addendum and just put where buyer has acknowledged that they understand that although they've signed the FVAC form, whatever it is, a mandatory clause form, that they are aware that even if the property appraises for less, they will pay the difference. So maybe spell it out in an addendum, so that way all parties have read it and understood it, and that might hold more weight for you too. So maybe do something like
Put it
that.
on the cover and also do what on the addendum.
No, just put it in an addendum. Yeah. So I think that would be nice. that could help you. And then, like I said, depending upon the agent, because you don't know the conversation the agent's having with their clients. You really don't. And so they could be telling them, don't even worry about it. Because even sometimes when they really can't cancel, sometimes the agent doesn't even understand the contract and they're telling them, we could just walk away. Don't even worry about it. Like, they don't understand that this is a legal contract. Like, they don't get it, that, obviously time is of the essence. And that's why they're making, these forms to be so transparent and so obvious. It's like anyone can read them.
And on top of that, my client is pregnant, she's doing 3 months, and then I was picking up, because I look at the picture she sent, a letter with the picture, and I noticed, well, she's pregnant. But I didn't want to say it, what if she's not pregnant? Sometimes we have a problem.
Really?
That's just a body figure.
So
Yeah,
I
I'm
said,
having
I
like
don't
10
like
tamales
it.
next week.
I said, I don't
Sorry,
know.
Sonia.
Client is pregnant, right?
She's like,
She goes, yeah. I go, oh my God. I go, what if she's due before we close? Then we're gonna have a situation. And then I talked to the lender said, that's discrimination. I go, no, that's gonna be like, it's gonna fall off of escrow if she do before we close.
Yeah, let's just say she goes into early labor. She's not working, she don't qualify.
that's
Now,
what it is.
she told me, the agent told me, no, she's doing, in 100 days, she has 100 days. I go, good, because you put on the offer 30 days. If we don't close in 30 days,
I'm
we
canceling.
cancel it. Oh,
So,
yeah.
yeah, well then
Yeah.
keep on top of them, I would.
Yeah.
Make sure you're on top, make
What
sure,
did she do before?
yeah,
But you can control that.
yeah,
That's a whole different class.
yeah.
Why is it an issue?
Because she's gonna go to labor.
FMLA.
She's not gonna be working.
No, you have to be working. You can't be on disability.
Yeah, not because she has pregnancy, no.
Yeah, you cannot close escrow, if you're not, you need a check. They're gonna call,
They're gonna call you at the end.
they call before funding, and if they say, oh, she's on maternity leave, not
Boom.
funding, your deal is dead.
Now it makes sense. I was like, wait, she can
Yeah,
sign digitally in the
Yes.
hospital.
No,
But
it's,
what she don't make enough,
Right,
right?
right. Now it makes sense. Okay, yeah. I was missing that part.
That's why you advise your
Now I have two
credit
problems
lady,
now.
keep working. I don't care if you're paying, or else he's gonna close his file.
yeah, go have your baby on your lunch break.
Right.
Come back to work.
Then 911 pick me up, we still got another 2 weeks to go to spare.
Just a random question. So let's just say, deposit, everything's done, almost about to close, and she goes on FMLA a week before closing.
Done, dead.
That deposit, does it go back to the client or no?
If all contingencies are removed,
That's it.
No,
Yeah.
they don't get it back.
no.
Well, that's good.
No.
Why?
And even though if it's conventional or FHA, doesn't matter?
No,
No.
It's just that they can't get their loan.
Oh, that's good. They put 15,000.
no, but okay, but hold on a minute. But again, right, but hold on a minute, okay, hold on. Again, you have to remember that it has to be mutually signed. It's not automatic.
Yeah.
So what happens? Buyer and seller don't agree, right? Okay, but seller is urgent to sell. Guess what? Seller legally cannot open another escrow without canceling one. So if buyer's agent is smart, buyer's agent say, don't sign. They're gonna wanna list the home again. They can't sell it without canceling this one. So guess what? You gotta give money back.
Yeah.
So it's not that simple. And
Is
that's,
that just for FHA?
no, it's everything.
They need to cancel.
But some people have opened at another restaurant.
I know, but you're not supposed to. But let me tell you this.
If you saw that now-
But let me tell you something. What you could do, what happens at that point, so let me say, let's say if I'm buyer's agent, right? I'm gonna tell my buyer, look, you're gonna lose your deposit. You knew you were pregnant. You shouldn't have gotten pregnant.
Should've waited.
No. No, so it's like, you knew this was a possibility, so now, why don't, you're gonna have to give up something, maybe not lose it all, but, maybe give them half or something, come to some kind of agreement, because it really isn't fair
Yeah.
that the seller has to lose out. So that's me, I'm all about what's fair, not,
Yeah.
you're my client, I'm gonna do it, no, you did the wrong thing, you should have done the right thing. So, but anyways, what's gonna happen is, if I see that the listing agent is being ridiculous, being hard, and I'm not giving your client their deposit back, and maybe they should, because maybe something, happened that was unforeseen, but everything was removed, because it does happen. At that point, we can call Rod, our attorney, and say, Rod, they don't want to give the deposit back, and he can put a lien on their home.
Now you can sell it.
Now they can't sell it. So that's what I'm saying, there's
Open up
ways.
financial, ain't gonna happen.
There's ways to go about it, because now there's some kind of dispute on title. What's the dispute? Because we don't know, right now, maybe their escrows with Legacy, right? But now they're gonna open it with ABC escrow, and they're not gonna know.
Nope.
And you won't know till it's closed. But on FHA, you will, guess what? Because you need a case number.
Yes, FHA, yeah.
But on conventional, you wouldn't know, but on VA and FHA, you would know. So that's why I'm saying, you just have to be careful, but don't automatically tell your sellers, oh, if in 10 days they don't do this, then we keep the deposit. Don't say that.
No, I never
Because
mentioned it. I know it's
that
really
is
hard.
not that easy. It's like, at that point, we have a right to keep it, but we gotta fight for it. And so they're like, fight for it, so, because again, remember, if it's not mutually agreed, now you gotta go to small claims. If it's under 10,000, if it's more, then you have to file a lawsuit. So good luck with that. That's why typically I don't write higher than 10,000 as far as deposit goes, because otherwise to get into court is expensive,
Yeah.
or mediation is expensive. So small claims is under $100. You go get a court date and, you decide who's right or who's wrong. But the thing is you still have to go to court, and you still have to fight for the money, because escrow cannot release it without, a judgment or a mutual agreement. So you have to just be wise about it. And that's why, it's important to communicate with who you're working with, the agent.
I had to buy, the seller on the other end wanted me to put 3% of the purchase price of 600,000. I still took them down. I came back and said, we're only putting $5,000. That's more than enough.
Yeah.
And he came back. I said, you want to sell it? And I told my client, don't fall in love with it until we're in escrow. Because if he's gonna be a pain in the ass right now, guess what? Don't blame me. I'm telling you, because I'm the expert. And I already know how to deal with people that are pain in the ass. I don't have time for them. So he agreed with 5,000? Yeah, smooth. You put your tone from the beginning. You know what I mean? Yeah, you want to sell, but at the same time, I'd rather sell smooth than sell and end up in court. That ain't me.
Yeah. So,
I'm not doing it, so.
so let's see real quick. I think someone.
And I know exactly what to do.
Okay.
We're giving you the
Yeah.
chance.
So here, okay, so let's go on. I mean, we could be here for days. There's so many different examples, but notice the seller to perform. So there are times, when the seller's not moving as quickly as we'd like them to, the buyers are excited and maybe the sellers aren't. So these are different reasons to give the seller, a notice to perform, or if they're not removing their the replacement property contingency. And this is why it's important for you to include the SPRP in the contract, because if you don't have one, you don't know what terms they're removing or not removing. So removal of finding a replacement property, or or closing on their replacement property. So that's the notice to perform. Here's the receipt for reports. Again, and same things apply up front. The date between the property address, and this here is important, for you guys to be sending this to your clients, or your transaction coordinator to be sending. This is so that way the buyers acknowledge they received it and they can't say they didn't. A lot of times, we already know if they don't get the disclosures within a certain amount of time, this here is going to be, your proof, of when it was sent, by how you sent it. And then what they did add is delivered via link. I don't know if you guys noticed that, but that's actually new because they know now that everything is actually digital. You know, you're not getting a physical report anymore. You know, you're getting, I know like some of these, like home inspection, they'll send us a link. You can download the PDF if you want, but there's a link. You can, if you did send it via link, then you just mark the box there that it was sent via a link. Okay, so there's that. And all right, here too, it says reports delivered via link. For all reports identified by a check below, buyer is unable or unwilling to open the link, is unable to download the document, or prefers to receive other documents directly rather than via the link. They can mark there too if they prefer to receive they don't want they want hard copies. And then here is the RLAS, which is, you know, right now, a lot of sellers are doing contingent sales. And they're asking to stay in the property longer. Oh, sorry. They're asking to stay, you know, in the property longer than, then after the close of escrow. So basically this form definitely needs to be incorporated into the purchase agreement. So because this is like Marta was saying, when you're in your honeymoon stage, everything's great, but then you don't want to negotiate terms after. No. You have to negotiate terms ahead because things change. So whether I'm representing buyer or seller, I always have my seller, or if I'm helping the buyer, I make that seller leave a deposit in escrow because, you know, here's your rental amount, but always put some type of security deposit, 2,000, 2,500, 3,000, depending upon what the rent is. But that's so important because let me just tell you this. They stay in there 30 days after, 40 days after, whatever they stay after. This protects you as an agent because your clients are going to be more mindful because they have skin in the game. So that's why I tell my sellers, it's standard. You have to leave a deposit because you're a tenant now. You're becoming a tenant. So the money's going to be kept in escrow. But when you move out, if there's any damage done to the home, then they're going to use that deposit to pay for the damage. If there's not, you get the money back. Oh, okay, Sonia, no problem. So usually they're going to be very, very aware and make sure I don't want my deposit, right? Who doesn't want their money back? So they're going to be more mindful. If you tell your sellers, because again, yes, we're working for the seller, but again, remember that you don't need that headache from the other agent calling you, telling you your seller spilled punch as they walked out. Now the carpet's stained or whatever the case is. And now you're like, you know, I wouldn't want that done to me. So that's why I do on to people, you know, as you would want done to you. So I had one where the seller didn't tell me, and it's so funny because they had a deposit in escrow and they moved out, and she had just called me, hey Sonia, when are we gonna get our deposit released? I said, well, the buyers are supposed to go tomorrow to you know, get the keys, and then I'll let you know. Well, I happened to drive by the house because I went to go look at someone else's house in the area. I'm like, there's mattresses like hanging over the curb, and this is a nice house in a nice area. So I'm like, what? Someone like I'd never imagined my clients left that there. Okay. So the agent calls me and she says, Sonia, there's trash in front of the house. They left mattress, they left like a few things. And I'm like, oh my God, they did leave it. So I called my client. I said, you want your deposit back, but yet you left a mattress you never told me you were leaving this mattress. And she said, oh, well, I called the city or whatever, the trash to pick it up. They're supposed to pick it up. And I said, well, you can get your deposit back until that's picked up, because otherwise I need to use that money to have it, you know, removed. And so all of a sudden she got on it. She's like, what? Oh my God, I didn't know. I go, if you knew you were going to have bulky stuff, so tell your clients that. You're in the house for 40 days after, you know that there's bulky stuff that needs to be taken. And yes, the city will come pick up some bulky stuff or whatever. Call within enough time so it's gone when you leave. Because if it's still there when you leave, they have a right to keep your deposit at that point. So just make sure that you have, those discussions with your clients, because again, you don't need those calls. You don't need the headaches. So that's why, to me, the deposit is so important. And then in regards to the, what the tenant agrees to pay, whatever they agreed to pay, it's good to have them pay it through escrow. If they're getting proceeds, from their sale, have escrow cut the check directly to the new person. That way, I didn't get payment. And then now they're calling you again for other stuff. Yeah, it is. It's take it before they get it. It's just, it's better. So that's why this form is super important to be negotiated, during that time.
I have a question, Sonia. I have a client right now that he's sending this form. And I told him, pretty much I told him that my seller is not accepting nothing like this, just because she hasn't found a house yet and she doesn't know when she's gonna find a house. So, and I put an MLS that the contingency has to be, they have to find the house, and we're gonna close accordingly.
Yeah, concurrently, okay.
Well, so I don't need to.
That if you're closing concurrently and your client is gonna move out 29 days, no later than 29 days after escrow, they don't need this form. They need the SIP. This is only if they're gonna stay 30 or more days after closing. If they don't plan to, if they're closing concurrently, there's no reason they should need 30 more days.
Yeah, and I don't want, she doesn't want to use that more stuff.
So maybe, she needs 10 days after, to move out, or 7 or 10 days or whatever. I mean, everybody's different, but so I would just say how you're gonna close concurrently. So remember, concurrently means their home closes one day and yours either closes the next or the next, depending on what day that lands on.
Yeah.
So make sure that you don't let them close maybe even on a Friday, because then now you lose 2 days. And yeah, so you have to line it up so it makes sense. So maybe ask for 10 days. Yeah. Yeah, the SIP form. And, okay, so that is the residential lease. And then obviously the residential lease has all its extra bug bed disclosure, all of the, because remember, they're now tenants. Okay, so that's why all of that is included in that. Here's the request for repair or other action. Again, make sure you're numbering your repairs accordingly. The date prepared, so the date you're preparing this document, and then dated the agreement. So the agreement again is December 5th, and you're gonna put that. So buyer request and check all that applier. Seller has no obligation to respond. Okay? You see that now? Because some people are like, how the seller's not responding? And guess what? They don't have to.
Just a request.
But at least that's something.
Yeah,
They could've
no
said
news is good news. I'm just kidding. That's what they used to say, but I don't know if that's true anymore.
Not with that.
So buyer here requests prior to final verification, repair or take the other specified action. So remember here, you can attach a list or you can write them out. What I usually do is if it's minor stuff, if they're like, oh, I just want GFCIs or I need that wall patch. Okay, no problem. I'll type it out. But if it gets complex where they're like, I want to make sure this and this and that and this and that, and obviously I'm not the professional, then typically what I'll tell my clients is send me an email, type up what it is that you're requesting, and then I'll attach that. So make sure you review your report, send it to me. And the reason I do that is because I don't ever want when let's say, because, again, you're negotiating there. Oh yeah, they agreed to your terms. Oh, great. Well, what they thought and what I communicated is not the same. So when we're doing final walkthrough, which I actually, and this is why I do this, I actually had this happen. I was doing a final walkthrough with this person that was horrible to work with. So we did the final walkthrough, whatever, and she was already in a bad mood. And she's like, she asked for the fan to be in working condition, because I had her write it out, and that was her thing, fan to be working. So she, it was dirty and it was gross, but she just put fan to be working. It wasn't working, I guess, because it had a lot of grease or something. So she turned it on and she's like, the fan, she goes, oh, the fan's working. She's like, but it's filthy. I can't believe this. And she started cussing, and like, she was just one of those. And I was like, being like, as professional as I could be, but I was like ready to just let it out. I'm looking at my request for repairs. I'm like, oh, well, here you didn't ask them to clean it. You asked them to make sure it works. It works. We're good. I was like, ooh, like, ooh. So then she's like, well, can you show me the rest of the repairs have been good? I go, well, the next thing is the water, and go ahead, I'll follow you. Oh, like, it was bad. It was bad. It was so bad. It was real bad. Yes, I had to record it because we were exchanging words in our final walkthrough. It was bad. The lady was bipolar and beyond, whatever goes beyond that. It was so bad. I'm not kidding you. She walked in the house because they had a really big, like a big painting on the wall. It was a very nice house. And there was stairs. And so they took their painting down. They patched the holes. I mean, they were small. Barely. And so she walked in, she's like, what the F? I'm like, oh, hi, nice to see you too. And she's like, what? They effed up this house. I'm gonna have to this and this and that. And I'm like, actually, that would make a nice accent wall if you just painted it. Like, I was being sarcastic as hell at that point, because I was like, yeah, the whole transaction, she was just so horrible to work with. She's just a miserable lady. And yeah, she was just, horrible. Yes. I'm not even kidding. It got to the point where, if I tell you the story, but it got to the point where she was supposed to pick up keys the next day. Well, she decided, she changed her mind. So she wanted her keys right now. So she went, and they weren't done moving out. She started throwing their stuff out of the house. That's how she was. Yes.
Oh my
The agent called me. She said, my clients are leaving all kinds of stuff behind. They are terrified of this lady. They left. And then the next day she calls me. Oh, they left some items behind. Do they still want to come for it? Hell no.
Goodbye, we're
I'm
done.
telling you, it was something else.
Oh my goodness.
So as I'm telling you, you don't know who you're dealing with. So just cover yourself. So that's why, like I said, that's why I tell them, oh, you want this done? Okay, write it for me. So I'm going to take it from here to here. I'm not going to do anything in between, because otherwise they might think, well, I wanted it replaced. I didn't want it repaired. Or there's, so many different things, especially like a water heater, let's just say, it's at the end of its life, but they're like fighting because they want a new one. The seller's like, it still works. Like, yeah, it barks at you when you're close to it, but it still works, So so that's why it's important. So that way, otherwise they're going to blame you. I told you this. And it's like, and how many times is that not the case? That's why a lot of times I do record a lot of the stuff, because it's like, I want to go back. Because a lot of times, I'll be honest, I'm not present 100% because I'm thinking of other things. I'm doing other things. I put on record, and it's like, okay, let me go back. Now I'm here. Okay, this is what they said. What? No, I was kidding. So I'm like,
Do you have to tell them when you're recording?
I don't, because
Okay.
I'm not going to use it against them. It's just for me, to revisit that.
I
Yeah.
have one that I just sold down the street for $1 million. It's a big property. And the guy is one of those Millennium white guys from Orange County, so he knows it all. And he's just a real pissy attitude. And he's like, the agent told me he was gonna have it spot and clean, detailed clean, Martha. And there's like, it's gross. There's hair all over. And I said, he said that? And he said, yeah, he said he was gonna have it detailed clean. I said, I don't remember that. I remember he said he was gonna have it cleared out for the tenant stuff. No personal belongings will be, but in my 20-something years, no seller has ever detailed and clean the home. It
Yeah.
doesn't happen. They don't have to, you know? And I said, but I'll check, you know, because we're only messengers, right?
Yeah,
So, and they, he's like, I never told him, he can cancel, I could tell him where to go. And I just let him rant, you know, let him unload. for the
right.
teenager. I said, I'm just relaying the message, James, you know how our clients can be. And he's like, well, I didn't detail clean it, but he can cancel because I'm sick of his, you know what? And I'm thinking like, you know, don't get emotional. It's not
It's
your
not.
decision, you know, but I'm not gonna fight with him.
Yeah,
So he's like, I go, can you just relay the message? He goes, I will, but he goes, and so I texted back to my client. I said, he said he only said he was gonna clear it out, and that's what he did. So, but people get
Yeah.
really.
Yeah.
fussy.
no, and sometimes we hear what we want to hear, you know? So that's why too, that's why it's important to recap. Okay, just want to make sure this is what we're doing. You know, like I said, because there's certain people that I feel that I have to really protect myself because I'm like, yeah, this person can change on me any second. Like you can feel it.
So
Yeah.
you just write list attached or something?
Yeah, there's a right here where it says, where you can check mark it and it says list attached. And then you
Okay.
put the date. So date it, and then when you send it to be signed, have them sign this, and then also I put their signatures at the bottom of the list that
At
they
least
signed.
did.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And then here, seller and buyer request, section 1 or whatever of the termite report, if that's applicable, or buyer request that seller credit buyer, you know, X amount. Or buyer request that they modify the price, and then the new price goes here. So just depending on whatever your seller is, and then this also gives you kind of a note, which is good because people misunderstand. A seller cannot give a buyer money per se, right? So because of lending practices, so the money has to go towards their, their closing costs or any cost. So just explain to your client, it's like, you're gonna get $5,000, but that's $5,000, that $5,000 that you would have put your saving, because they don't understand that. They're like, but I don't want them to pay my closing costs. I want the repair. And that's another thing. Depending on the repair, because obviously sellers are gonna do the cheapest route. In the contract, it does say sellers are to provide receipts to the buyer. It does say that in the contract. And a lot of times agents don't know that, don't ask for that. But when you're asking for repairs, you make sure you put on there, we want a roof certification by a licensed roofer, or we want a licensed plumber to give us, an estimate or whatever. So you always want to make sure it is that, because we are not supposed to hire anyone that's not licensed.
So is that
Now, if the
okay?
buyer does that, once they get in there, that's on them.
Is that okay? I advise my sellers when they're gonna sell, like, if anything is wrong with the house, fix it.
Oh, yeah, it's better to do
Because
it before.
later,
Yes.
if they want the repair, you have to get a licensed person.
Yes, it's better to do it. Yeah, it's their home. I mean, they don't have to, but I'm saying as a buyer's agent, I always ask for that for the buyer. Now, if I'm the seller's agent and you have a handyman or your brother-in-law is an electrician or whatever, because sometimes companies aren't as good as maybe someone who has the practice, who knows how to do it, so it's just really your call. But depending on who I'm representing, then I have to, obviously, I can't say, oh, just we'll have them do, just this person that lives up the block, fix your electrical, because now that makes me responsible because I'm hiring someone who's not licensed. So
buyers still gonna have a licensed person go do the inspections. If something is wrong, they can say.
yeah, and I've had where the listing agent will say, oh, well, my seller is a handy and he can do the work. So then I'll tell the buyer the seller's gonna do the work. Do you want him to, or do you want a credit? And you can do it yourself after. So that's typically why I usually tell my clients, try to get the credit. It's easier. You could do it after, but certain things have to be done because they're health and safety too. Like I had one that was a furnace, the furnace wasn't turning on, so we had to have a brand new furnace put in. He wanted to do that after, but they couldn't because the appraiser said that it doesn't turn on. So we had to do that, ahead of time. So there's certain things that have to get done ahead of time, but other things you can always, have them do it after by giving a credit or lowering the price or what have you. And FHA or VA buyers, buyers, FHA or VA lender requires, and that's on number 3, requires specified action in the appraisal or other lender documentation if checked. So buyers, FHA or VA lender requires the following to be repaired. So this is if the appraiser or the underwriter calls something out. So like I had one where the appraiser called out the furnace, but when the underwriter saw the report, she called out additional things. She said, I want the eaves to be painted. I want the water heater stand to be fixed because it was like all like rotted. There was a hole in the garage. I want that to be repaired. So she called out additional items too.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Now that you say about that. This agent wrote on the offer, any repairs, requested repair, any repairs need to be done, buyers to pay. She wrote it in.
Yeah.
The offer. So if the lender calls out something or appraisal, can they go pay and fix it? Or how is that gonna happen?
Yeah,
have
I
never
mean-
had buyers fix something, it's seller's home,
Yeah.
so how that's gonna work? Let's say.
I mean, they can, or they can, I mean, a lot of sellers don't want a buyer to touch their property. Are they living there?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it can be done if they agree, but
but
I
it's weird,
I mean, as a seller or owner of a home, I don't know that I would want someone in my house fixing repairs. I don't know, So it just has to be, agreed upon. I mean, they can do anything as long as it's agreed. I would probably wait till they're, that they're fully approved or whatever, and then, let them make the repairs, but I don't know. That's gonna be your seller's call. Hopefully they don't need any repairs.
No, that's okay.
Yeah.
But I was thinking, how they gonna go fix stuff and not their home?
They're like, hi, Yeah, it's just if it's agreed. And so, or it says buyer requests that seller pay for the following costs or expenses. So this now has, before it didn't have this on the bottom, if you notice. There was a separate form for FHA or VA buyer lender required request. It's all on the same form now. So it's all here. Okay, because a lot of times people weren't sending it anyways. They weren't sending the right form. So I think that's why. And then here goes where the contingency removal. So again, you're agreeing to release a contingency if they do those repairs as agreed. And then buyer proposes this request for repair. And look at it says, unless by 5 on the 3rd day, they added this too, it expires. If buyer withdraws this, at any time prior to the seller's acceptance by communicating withdrawal or seller to seller's agent. So they could withdraw it and maybe do another one or just not do it at all. And then seller's response, if they agree, don't agree. So that all kind of looks the same. Or they can respond on a RRR. Buyer requests are not incorporated into this agreement. Seller responds to buyer's request on attached addendum. So there's another addendum they could attach, or they don't agree at all. Buyer, and then here's the buyer's response. So it's kind of the same. It's just a little bit more detailed. And then here's the RRR form, which is the response. And then seller either agrees, or gives credit or modifies purchase price or other. And then again, FHA, VA. And it tells you right here, if the parties do not reach an agreement on completing the repairs, then the FHA or VA lender will not loan the buyer the funds. So if this happens, there's no finance contingency that has not been removed, buyer may cancel this agreement. So that's why it's letting the seller know. So it's actually doing what our job would be. This is what our job is to tell the seller, like, it's FHA, these have to be done. You select that, and a lot of times too, like if I'm gonna do a listing, I'll go look around and my clients will say, is there anything that you think we need to do? And I'm like, well, if you're gonna think about taking an FHA buyer, you're gonna have to fix this, all this peeling paint. Or maybe there's something that's health and safety that I see that's an issue, that appraiser may call that out. So if you don't want to do nothing, then you just can't go with an FHA or VA buyer. I mean, but in this area and this price, that's all there is. So, again, that's what our job is to let them know ahead of time, what to expect.
If they don't ask me, that house isn't a septic. If they don't ask me for nothing, I don't give him nothing.
No,
Okay.
Buyer's due diligence.
yeah. See, and a lot of agents don't do that up front. They don't know. And then, but if it's FHA or VA, a septic is required, a certification.
Yes.
Yes.
But
So
sometimes
it's
the
gonna come up.
But sometimes the appraiser will go and they won't even know it's
I know,
septic, so
I
they
know.
don't call it out, so you'll.
So if a person doesn't ask, it's fine.
No, that's-
So what's gonna happen is the underwriter could ask. So,
Don't forget, there is a form in your seller's questionnaire. It says, if
Yeah.
you're a septic or sewer.
Oh, yeah, it's
If seller says it's on septic, then it's your liability. So
Yeah.
let the other person
Right.
know that it's on
Yes.
septic.
Well, I put it on the MLS.
Yeah.
No, but that's not enough. You gotta put it on the TDS.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There.
yeah, as long as it's there, they don't read it, then that's on them. I mean, you're not gonna sit there and read them a bedtime story, right?
Okay.
And this
Yeah.
property. is
Yeah.
all septic.
Yeah.
They'll come back and make you do that. So-
What's up on the
Yeah.
Watch
What's
out.
up on the time?
It's not working.
Yeah. So because they changed so many of the addendums, if you notice the seller counteroffer, they kind of put them in here to make it easier, for you guys. So if you need to attach anything. So again, the SPRP is on there, the tenant occupied property addendum, the residential lease after sale, backup offer addendum, and, any other addendum. So just so you can see, it makes it easier, but it also has other in case there's something else that needs to be incorporated, okay? And then if you notice, they added this, marketing to other buyers. Seller has the right to continue to offer the property for sale. Seller has the right to accept any other offer received prior to acceptance of this counter. And then in such event, seller is advised to withdraw the seller counter offer before accepting another offer. Okay, and look, this is a seller counter offer. So let's just say, for instance, they have the rights, telling you right here, they have the right to accept another offer. So you can, if your seller decides to withdraw this counter offer, there's a form for that, WOO, whoa, that form.
So if I wanted to keep showing the house, I needed to send that?
No, you can keep showing it. It's, what happens is this, because obviously a home isn't under contract until it's signed, right? You have a counter out, it's still not under contract technically. So you can still show it, okay? So let's just say you showed it, this other buyer's taking a long time, okay? Taking, or not responding right away. This person showed it, I'm writing an offer, I'm gonna send it to you right now. You send it to your client, and your client's like, oh my God, I love this house. Okay, so do you want to withdraw this counter offer you gave to this person? Then let's send the WOO before we get the acceptance. Do you see what I'm saying? Let's send it to them. So now this counter is void. And now you can send them a seller multiple counter offer. If that's what you want to do, to keep them in the play, but now you have something else. So you're disclosing to that new buyer, they should have acted. Your agent shouldn't have been lollygagging somewhere, or you as a buyer shouldn't have been, thinking about it. Because now there's someone else who doesn't need to think about it. You see what I'm saying? So now it's too late, but you have to send that, but see, it's all gonna be in the delivery. So if you get the counter offer signed, but yet you still haven't told your seller, that doesn't count, that you already got it in your inbox. So it's executed.
Yeah, that's what that happened to me. And so I send that to the first counter that I sent out to. And then when the agent got mentioned with, whoa, I'm like, well, you didn't sign anything. So now I'm the multiple counter today. So now you're up to the fight too. It's just fair. You know what I mean? So if you would have signed it and give it to me, then I would have never sent you this. I had to take it because it's an accepted offer. I said, but since you didn't sign it and it's taking me, like I said, 3 days, 4 days, now I have more offers. So now I have to, by law, say, let you know that now there's multiple counter offers. Now your counter offer is being withdrawn. Now you're under counter offers.
Mm-hmm.
Unless it expires, right? I mean, after the third day. it's
Yeah,
expired.
otherwise it
Yeah.
expires, yeah, so either one, but like, it's just like, let's say you send out the counter right now, and then someone just sends an offer, so, and you're like, you tell your seller, look, we're getting another offer, what do you want me to do? Do you wanna just let it ride, or do you want me to withdraw it and then resend it as a multiple? You know what I'm saying, so now you have time to negotiate both, so it's just, it's your call. But just so you know, this was added, and it makes it very clear, what you can and can't do. And then here's a seller multiple counter offer. And like I said, if you notice in all of the counter offers, that liquidated damages is there up top on each one. And it kind of just shows you again, the same thing. It has all the addendums there. And then here it just talks again about binding effect. So the seller is making multiple offers to prospective buyers on terms that may or may not be the same. So not all, they don't have to be the same. They could be different. The multiple counter offer does not bind a seller and buyer unless all of the following occur in the times specified below. Seller signs in paragraph 5, which is here.
Go better.
Buyer signs in seller signs. Yeah, so I'm like, yeah, paragraph signs, paragraph 7. Seller signs in paragraph 8, and then buyer and seller shall have no duties or obligations for the purchase of the property. So here we go down here. So they have to sign, obviously here, this is the first one. Oh my God, time's going quick. And then here, acceptance. And then here, 8, the one they accept.
If my seller hasn't accepted that one,
8,
uh-huh,
it was a multiple counter offer. If they haven't signed that, then it's not binded. The offer is not binded.
that my seller didn't sign that.
No, they have,
They just sent me the agent told me, your seller hasn't signed. I just got it back.
oh, okay. Well, look, saved by the bell. So here's the seller property questionnaire. So if you notice, it's a lot more words. Dang it, it's a lot more reading. So again, goes over, you are strongly advised to carefully review the disclosure information advisory before you complete this seller property questionnaire. All sellers of California real property are required to provide various disclosures, either by contract or by statute or case law. Many disclosures must be made within certain time limits. Timely and thorough disclosures help reduce the disputes and facilitate a smooth sales transaction. So again, here we go, disclosure limitation. The following are representations made by the seller and are not the representations of the agents, if any. This disclosure statement is not a warranty of any kind by the seller or any agents and is not a substitute for any inspections or warranties the principal may wish to obtain. This disclosure is not intended to be part of the contract between buyer and seller unless otherwise specified in writing. Broker and any real estate licensee or other person working with or through broker has not verified information provided by seller. A real estate broker is qualified to advise on real estate transactions. If seller or buyer desires legal advice, they should consult an attorney. Okay, so it says it right then, right there. You could even, your TC could even highlight this and send it to your seller when they complete it, okay? Note to seller, purpose, to tell the buyer about known material or significant items. When a seller tells you, I had this happen, what should I tell them? Is that something you would want to know? Yes, then tell them. Because you're in the honeymoon stage right now. So tell them, they will be okay with it,
Find out later.
But yeah, let them make that decision if they're okay with it. Don't tell me, a good example, you
You don't have to
guys.
say you have to.
No, it's a good example is if you go to the listing agreement and they tell you someone passed on the property, disclose it in the MLS. Why are you gonna go through all the motions and then, you're like, oh, by the way, here's the SPQ, someone died in the property. Oh, my client doesn't know, like they didn't want any, anything to do with that. It's just so much of a waste of time. So it's super important and some people feel if you're waiting to disclose that, then there might be more. You know, they feel like there might be more to it, so just make sure, or if that's a concern of your client, like, would you mind if someone passed in any of the properties that we, that we preview? No, it doesn't bother me at all, or no, or they'll say, just don't tell my kids. I'm okay with it, just don't tell the kids, I'm like, "Oh, you don't have to tell them, but whoever's in that house might tell them." No, I'm just kidding.
The neighbors, I closed one.
Yeah,
in
the
the
neighbors
video,
too, yeah.
And the first, I didn't disclose it because it was barely 3 years, like a week.
But you, okay,
I
okay.
didn't disclose.
Okay.
So they told me after 3 years, you don't have to.
No,
Okay,
that's not
do
true.
it.
No.
Oh my
If you
God.
know. then
Okay,
you have to
anyways, we
disclose,
closed,
right?
and guess what? A neighbor came. Hello?
Oh, yeah, the neighbors are gonna tell.
Oh, hi. Do you know the lady that lives here? She
Passed away?
passed away. They said, what?
Huh.
Well, the agent called me, she was speaking out, I go, yeah. She said, why didn't you tell me? Well, he says after it's been more than 3 years, it says in the.
It does, but again, if there's any known material facts, now it's specific, it does say that, and I agree with you.
Uh-huh.
But if the seller tells you, my mom died here 5 years ago, do I have to disclose that? Yes.
But you need to disclose with this,
Yeah, with that
But what
form.
it says here, 3 is somebody.
I understand that, but you still have to disclose it. I know. And you know what? Let me see. Okay, let's see.
Someone that exact thing happened to, they didn't disclose it, and then the buyer had no knowledge of it, and they bought the home and everything, and it was like for a month, when they found out, they sued the agent, and the agent had made like 20 grand on the commission, and she got sued for 40,000, and she lost in court.
Yes, yes.
Because they need to do like a spiritual cleanse, and all kinds of stuff. And I don't know how the buyer didn't find out, but the buyer was an FBI agent. So how did the buyer not
See,
know?
he should have lost anyway.
Yeah.
How did they not
No,
know?
but just so you know, if
No,
they,
buyer's tax lawyer. And they
I investigated everything.
no, you have to disclose. So, anything that they tell you, it's knowledge. If they're like, I wanna, no, don't tell me. I don't wanna know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
No, unless you know the better.
Yeah.
we disclose the transaction.
Yeah.
And I disclose in the MLS and everything, but I don't know if the buyers didn't disclose. So it's not my liability anymore, right?
No. They can't tell you, why didn't you say? Because you did say, it's there. So no, they can't. But just so you guys know, and then, because I was told this too, because this was many, many moons ago. The person who was teaching the class said that, they said, if it says the death of an occupant, that's a big, that's a big thing, that look at the death of an occupant on the property. So what does that mean? So I'm gonna go visit you, Juana, at your house. I don't occupy that property. I'm a visitor. But let's say I have a heart attack while I'm talking to you and I die there. That would mean that you wouldn't have to say anything, because they believe, the spiritual world, that I'm not gonna stay in your home. My spirit's gonna fly back to my home. Yeah, it gets technical. So, yeah, it's crazy, but it's, I had one where the son got shot at the corner and the house was like 10 houses from the corner. They dragged him. He was already dead. They dragged him to the curb of the house. Do you think they had to disclose that? Yes or no?
Yep.
Yeah, they did. Because why? Because their corner wasn't there to determine time of death.
Well, then they should remove the 3 years. I say.
I know. Why, you know what? Why they put that? I don't know. I mean, it is confusing, but just so you know, if you're, that can be no, because no one did die. That answer would be no, right? Because they died 3 years and 6 months, right? So it's gonna be a no, but if someone did pass, then they can just, in the explanation, just write. But however, there was, yeah, if it's natural causes, I think people are more concerned with,
Murder.
like a murder
Yeah,
scene. Like,
she had cancer,
Yes,
she was an
suicide.
older lady, and she
Right,
has
right.
drive by.
so that was what, they felt better about it.
Yeah.
It was like,
So again, just letting them know to answer each question. If they're not sure, or if they have, you know, something to add to that question, then that's what the explanation's for. Okay, and that's basically that. So those are all the forms that have been changed. And it says, if right here, if you check this and additional comments are needed, then, you know, you can add, you know, of an attachment to.
That's.
And then look at any occupant on the property. See, this is updated too. They're updating it by what happened. So now it's, are you aware of any occupant on the property smoking or vaping?
oh, wow. What they added, yeah.
Yeah.
Or baby, any substance, like.
Yeah, any substance, whether past or present. Yeah. So you'd be surprised. They're updating everything according, yeah?
I have a question.
It's so funny because your voice comes out of the TV, so we're like all freaked out. I know. What happened?
Okay, so I have a question. In LA, the houses are super close to each other. And this has come to my mind, you know, when I think about selling my property. So I don't have anyone smoking in my property, but my next door neighbor does. And he smokes a lot, you know, both husband and wife. And the smoke comes over. And even if I'm in my room with the windows open, it comes inside the room. You have to disclose something like that?
On number 16, where it says neighbors.
Got it.
That happened to my neighbor.
Okay,
Right there, because it says neighbors and then it says odor.
got it. Okay.
Yeah, and Victorville, I sold the house and the neighbors are always drunk up because of the other neighbors. Smoking all day.
Hey, at least they don't have to pay for it.
Yeah, they said, I can't believe I go, but I tell her, are you happy? She goes, all the time.
Okay,
All
there it
the
is.
time. That's why I like
Yeah, yeah, but no, that would be something that you would have to let them know, like, you know, it's like, because again, some people it won't bother, and then others it will. Maybe they have small children, so they're like, no, but then maybe there's other people who are like, ah, we smoke too, so we don't care, you know, so it's
But
just,
the other agent is supposed to disclose it to us. that
yeah, the
was-
listing, well, not the seller should be disclosing it on the SPQ, yeah.
Oh, but he has to, so. That's
He-
kind of a matter.
Yeah, so, and like I said, don't be afraid to disclose. Because it's better that you did than you didn't, you know?
In
So-
COVID, I had 3 clients, they passed. Yeah. We were like, before close.
Okay, so does anyone have any questions? Or are you on, right, no, that's why there's so much information, but as you need the form, you're gonna learn. Okay? All right, you guys, well, we'll see you next week then.
Thank you so much.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.